I knew something was wrong the moment I saw Karen marching up my driveway, clipboard in hand, eyes scanning my house like a drill sergeant inspecting a barracks. I took a slow sip of my coffee, watching from my porch as she adjusted her perfectly pressed blazer and cleared her throat like she was about to announce a mandatory draft. "Good morning, Mr. Dawson," she said with a smile so fake it should have come with a warning label. "Morning," I grunted, not bothering to get up. Karen had recently slithered her way into the HOA presidency after a scandalous election that made a back-alley poker game look like a church fundraiser. The previous president, old Mr. Wilkins, had been railroaded out after a surprise audit uncovered discrepancies, which conveniently disappeared as soon as Karen took over. Rumors swirled that she'd strong-armed votes, made promises she didn't intend to keep, and maybe even slipped a little under-the-table incentive to the right people. And now, she had a vision. A new neighborhood order. "Mr. Dawson," she began, glancing down at her clipboard. "It's come to my attention that your property is in non-compliance with the updated HOA regulations." I took another sip of coffee. "Is that so?" She nodded, flipping through her papers with exaggerated precision. "Yes. First and foremost, your American flag exceeds the size limit for front yard displays. The new regulation states that no flag can be larger than 2 by 3 feet. Yours is clearly oversized." I exhaled through my nose, barely containing my irritation. "Karen, I've had that flag up for 20 years. It was fine last month. It was fine last year." She gave me a patronizing smile. "Well, we're standardizing appearances now to maintain property values. And speaking of appearances," she turned a page. "Your house color doesn't conform to the approved HOA palette." I glanced at my home, an honest, earthy shade of deep green that blended with the towering oaks surrounding it. "Let me guess. You want me to paint it what?" "Beige. Sandstone," she corrected. "Or eggshell. Both are within the HOA's approved color range." I let out a short laugh. "Not happening." She pursed her lips, undeterred. "And then there's the matter of your dog." At the sound of the word dog, Duke, my 90-pound German shepherd, lifted his head from the porch beside me, ears perked up. "What about Duke?" I asked. Karen sniffed. "The new regulations state that all pets must be under 40 pounds. Large breeds are considered a potential nuisance." I stared at her, waiting for her to say she was joking. She wasn't. "So, let me get this straight," I said slowly, leaning forward. "You're telling a Marine veteran who spent years serving this country that he can't fly his flag, he has to repaint his house because you don't like the color, and he has to get rid of his dog because he doesn't fit your ridiculous new rules." Karen's smile didn't waver. "Rules are rules, Mr. Dawson. You'll find the fines listed in this packet." She handed me a thick folder, turned on her heel, and strutted back down my driveway like she had just conquered enemy territory. I looked down at the packet. The first page alone made my blood pressure rise. Violation, unapproved house color, fine, $500. Violation, oversized flag, fine, $200. Violation, large dog over 40 pounds, fine, $1,000 or immediate removal of pet. I clenched my jaw. This wasn't just about rules. This was about control. And if Karen thought she could steamroll me into submission, she was about to learn the hard way that I don't back down. I wasn't about to let some clipboard-wielding dictator tell me how to live on my own property. But Karen? She was just getting started. The first fine notice showed up in my mailbox 2 days later. Then another. By the end of the week, I had a neat little collection of HOA love letters, each one listing a fresh violation. Unapproved fence height, $300, hadn't changed in 10 years. Unauthorized vehicle and driveway, $150, my own damn truck. Lawn not meeting HOA aesthetic standards, $250, it was freshly mowed. She was coming at me from every angle, hoping I'd fold. But what she didn't know was that I'd spent a lifetime dealing with tougher adversaries than a suburban dictator with a superiority complex. So I fought back. I started with the law. HOA regulations only have teeth if they comply with state and local laws, and I knew for a fact that some of Karen's new rules were shaky at best. I called up an old friend from my service days, Dan, who now worked as a real estate attorney. He took one look at the HOA's revised regulations and laughed. "This is amateur hour," he said. "Half of these rules wouldn't hold up in court. And those fines? Completely unenforceable." That's all I needed to hear. I drafted a formal response, citing state property laws that overruled her ridiculous mandates. I also copied the HOA's own bylaws, highlighting where she had overstepped her authority. Then I mailed my response certified, with receipt confirmation. Karen wasn't going to push me around. Not legally, anyway. The next morning, my water was shut off. I stood in my kitchen, staring at the dry faucet, my jaw tightening. Coincidence? Not a chance. I walked outside and, sure enough, found a utility worker near the neighborhood water main. I approached, keeping my voice calm. "Hey there. What's going on?" "HOA requested a temporary shutoff for non-payment," he said, glancing at his clipboard. I narrowed my eyes. "Non-payment of what?" The guy shrugged. "Some kind of HOA service fees." "Look, I just get the work orders." I sighed. "I hear you, buddy. But here's the thing. This is illegal." I pulled out my phone, snapped a photo of his work order, and immediately called Dan. Within 20 minutes, I had an email draft ready to go. The HOA had no authority to mess with utilities. In fact, interfering with a homeowner's essential services could be considered criminal coercion. I attached a copy of the work order, CC'd the local utility commission, and sent it straight to Karen with the subject line: "Immediate cease and desist, legal violation." That same afternoon, my water mysteriously came back on. After that stunt failed, Karen took things to the next level. She sent out anonymous complaint letters to other homeowners, urging them to report me for any violations they noticed. She had HOA inspectors, aka her personal minions, snooping around my property, snapping pictures. She filed bogus noise complaints about my dog barking, despite Duke being about as loud as a sleeping cat. But the best one? I got a letter stating that my house was a safety hazard due to structural concerns and that I needed to undergo a mandatory HOA-approved inspection. Translation: she wanted an excuse to send someone into my home. I wasn't falling for it. Instead, I started gathering evidence. I set up security cameras. I recorded conversations. I even kept copies of every letter, every email, every ridiculous fine she tried to slap on me. And that's when I found the smoking gun. One night, I was going through some public HOA budget reports because, unlike Karen, I actually read the fine print. That's when I noticed some discrepancies. The HOA collected dues for community repairs, but there hadn't been any repairs. HOA funds had been spent on consulting fees, but no consultants had been hired. There was an administrative expense listed at nearly $20,000, but no records showed what it was used for. I dug deeper. And then it hit me. Karen was embezzling money. She wasn't just a power-hungry HOA president. She was a fraud. And now, I had the proof to take her down. Now that I had proof of Karen's embezzlement, I knew I had her cornered. But I also knew she wasn't the type to go down quietly. I spent the next few days gathering more dirt, pulling old HOA reports, collecting statements from past board members who had either quit or been forced out. One of them, a guy named Jerry, told me something interesting. "She's been funneling HOA funds into her own accounts for months," he said over the phone, claiming it's for neighborhood improvement projects that never happen. "Think you can put that in writing?" I asked. Jerry hesitated, but after I assured him I wasn't just some guy looking to stir trouble, I was building a legal case, he agreed. Between his testimony, the financial reports, and the blatant fraud in the HOA budget, I had enough evidence to burn her entire operation to the ground. But before I could make my move, Karen struck first. Late one night, I heard a loud banging on my front door. Duke leapt up, growling, as I grabbed the nearest thing I could use as a weapon, a steel flashlight. I swung the door open to find two police officers standing there, hands resting on their belts. "Mr. Dawson?" one of them asked. "That's me. We received a report that you're keeping illegal firearms on the premises. We need to ask you some questions." I exhaled slowly. "Of course. Who filed this report?" I asked. The officers exchanged a glance. "Anonymous tip." I almost laughed. Karen was getting desperate. "Look, Gentlemen, I said, stepping back and motioning inside. I'm a Marine vet. Everything I own is legal and locked up. But if you need to check, be my guest. They entered, did a thorough sweep, and, as expected, found nothing. One of the officers, a younger guy, gave me a knowing look. This happened before. Something like that, I said, folding my arms. His partner sighed. Figures. We've seen this kind of thing with HOAs before. If this keeps up, file a harassment report. I walked them out, watching as their cruiser disappeared down the street. That was the moment I realized. This wasn't just about fines anymore. This was war. And I wasn't going to just defend myself. I was going to end Karen's reign once and for all. The next day, I called for a residents' meeting. Normally, Karen was the only one who called meetings, but I had a few advantages she didn't. Firstly, everyone respected me. I'd been here longer than anyone, and I had a reputation for helping people out, whether it was fixing a broken fence or keeping an eye on houses while folks were on vacation. Secondly, people were fed up. The fines, the restrictions, the constant surveillance. Karen had pushed too many people too far. Thirdly, I had receipts. Literal receipts of her fraudulent activity. We met at my place. About 30 people showed up, half the neighborhood. I stood on my porch, cleared my throat, and held up the stack of HOA financial reports. Ladies and gentlemen, I began. Our beloved HOA president has been robbing us blind. I passed around the documents. People flipped through them, their expressions shifting from curious to shocked to furious. She's been collecting dues for community improvements that never happen, I continued. She's fining people for nonsense while she funnels our money into her own pockets. Murmurs turned into outraged shouts. She charged me a $500 fine for having a bird feeder, someone yelled. She said I needed HOA-approved garbage cans that cost $200, another neighbor snapped. One by one, people shared their stories, fines for minor infractions, threats for non-compliance, bogus rule changes. Karen had made an enemy of nearly everyone. I let them vent before raising my hands for silence. There's only one solution, I said. We remove her. Now, a few skeptical looks. Can we even do that? Someone asked. I nodded. The HOA bylaws say we can recall the president if a majority of homeowners sign a petition. Once we get enough signatures, we can force a vote and boot her out. I passed around the recall petition. People grabbed pens like they were signing a declaration of war. Within 20 minutes, we had more than enough signatures. It was time to deliver Karen's eviction notice. Armed with dozens of signatures, I led a group of neighbors straight to the HOA office, aka Karen's house. Karen had converted her garage into her official headquarters, which really meant she sat in there, sipping overpriced lattes, surrounded by stacks of rules she'd invented. We found her sitting at her desk, tapping away at her laptop like some kind of evil corporate overlord. She looked up, saw 30 angry homeowners standing on her driveway, and immediately went into damage control mode. Oh, hello everyone, she said, forcing a smile. If you had concerns, you should have scheduled an appointment through the HOA website. I stepped forward and dropped the petition onto her desk. No need. We're here to remove you. Her face twitched. Excuse me. I crossed my arms. We got the signatures. A majority of the homeowners want you gone. According to the HOA bylaws, you're out. For the first time, Karen actually looked nervous. She grabbed the petition, flipping through the pages as her hands started to shake. This isn't valid, she sputtered. I'm the elected HOA president. Not anymore, said Mrs. Carter, a retired schoolteacher. We voted you in, and we're voting you out. Karen wasn't having it. This is a coup. You can't do this, she screeched. You think you can just walk in here and... I pulled out the second set of documents. Fine, I said, flipping the pages in front of her. Then let's talk about these. Karen's eyes widened as she recognized them. Her fraudulent HOA transactions. Her misuse of funds. Her bogus fees and fabricated expenses. You embezzled HOA money, I said, my voice steady. That's fraud, Karen. And it's a crime. She went pale. You have no proof. I tapped the witness statement from Jerry, the former board member. Jerry confirmed everything. And the financial reports are all public records. You stole from us. And now, you're gonna pay for it. The crowd erupted. She raised our fees while stealing our money. I had to fight her to keep my own mailbox. She shut off my water last month for being late by a single day. Karen looked around, realizing no one was on her side. That's when she made her final mistake. You think you can beat me? She snapped. I'll sue every single one of you. I'll tie you up in court for years. A new voice cut through the chaos. Not if I sue you first. We all turned to see Dan, my attorney friend, standing at the edge of the crowd. He held up a legal notice. This is a formal lawsuit against Karen for financial fraud, abuse of power, and harassment, Dan announced. It'll be filed in court by the end of the day. Hope you have a good lawyer. Karen froze. For the first time, she realized she had no power left. Her threats meant nothing. Her authority was gone. And now, she was about to be buried under a legal avalanche. She sank into her chair, her mouth opening and closing like a fish gasping for air. You? She whispered, staring at me like I was some kind of nightmare come to life. I smiled. Pack your bags, Karen. You're done. Karen was finished, and she knew it. With the petition filed, she was officially removed as HOA president. But that wasn't even the worst of it for her, because Dan didn't stop at just kicking her out. By the next morning, Karen had been served with a lawsuit for fraud, embezzlement, and abuse of power. And the best part? She had to pay for her own legal defense. Without her ill-gotten HOA funds to back her up, she was in deep trouble. And oh, did the karma keep rolling in. With Karen out of power and her finances under investigation, the rest of the HOA board, who had been too scared to oppose her before, started scrambling. They called for an emergency meeting, desperately trying to keep the HOA intact. But the homeowners? They were done. People stood up, one after another, demanding to dissolve the HOA completely. Karen abused it to control us. We don't need some bureaucratic nightmare telling us what color to paint our houses. We should have the right to manage our own properties. The vote came in. And just like that, the HOA was officially disbanded. No more Karen. No more ridiculous fines. No more dictatorship in our own damn neighborhood. And as for Karen herself, with no HOA salary and a massive lawsuit looming over her, Karen's house went into foreclosure within 2 months. The neighborhood watched as she tried everything, filing complaints, attempting to countersue, even pleading for a second chance. Nobody listened. And then, one fine Saturday morning, as I sat on my porch sipping coffee, I saw the moment I'd been waiting for. Karen, standing in her driveway, packing up her things. Her car was stuffed with boxes. A moving truck was parked out front. And as she struggled to lift a heavy suitcase, she glanced over at me. I gave her a small nod, a silent goodbye. She opened her mouth, maybe to curse, maybe to beg, maybe to scream. But before she could say anything, the neighborhood erupted into a massive barbecue. Right in front of her house. Lawn chairs, grills, music, kids playing in the yard. A celebration of freedom. Karen stood there, fuming, watching as the very people she had tried to control cheered her downfall. And then, with one last glare, she got in her car and drove away. Gone. For good. With Karen out of the picture, life in the neighborhood returned to normal. No more harassment. No more stupid fines. Just people living their lives without a dictator breathing down their necks. As for me, I kept my house exactly the way it was. Green paint, oversized flag, and Duke still sleeping happily on my porch. Because this was my home. And no Karen in the world was ever going to take it from me. Thank you for being with us. Please share in the comments where you are from and whether you liked everything, and see you next time.